Good morning, I'm Duncan, you're watching Wake Up Well. It's Wednesday the 20th of May, which means we're in Psalm 20 in our current series in the book of Psalms. I'm going to jump straight in. It's a Psalm of David, and it says this in verse 1. May the Lord answer you when you are in distress. I wonder, when you find yourself in a difficult place, when we find ourselves in distressing situations, what and who do we turn to? Do we turn to family, to friends? Do we turn to experts in a particular field? Do we turn to Google? I know that I do very often. When we're backed against a wall and stuck between a rock and a hard place, who do we trust in? What do we put our trust in? Do we trust in our own abilities? Do we trust in science or religion? Do we trust in our finances? Do we trust in our popularity or our wit? Well, here in this psalm, David shows us that the only real thing to place our trust in is Jesus, is God. Because as the season that we find ourselves in is showing us in this global crisis that everything we've taken for granted in the past is being shaken, but the one thing that remains constant and true is God. And so David here in this psalm shows us 4 things to cling to in distressing situations. Number 1, cling to the name of God. He says, may the name of the God of Jacob protect you. And he goes on to say, while some trust in chariots, some in horses, we trust in the name of the Lord our God. You know, there's power in the name of God. I've seen blind eyes and deaf ears open. I've seen lame people walk as they've been prayed for in the name of Jesus. I've seen brothels shut down as we've declared the name of Jesus in red light areas, and women and children have been set free. There's power in the name of Jesus. Secondly, David shows us that we should cling to the presence of God. Verse 2, he says, may God send you help from the sanctuary and grant you support from Zion. He's talking here about the temple in Jerusalem in the Old Testament. It was the place where the very presence of God dwelt amongst men. And he's saying that is where your help will come from. Now we have the beautiful truth because of what Jesus has done, that his presence is now available to us wherever we are, that we, when we're in Jesus, become the temple. His presence, not just a nice idea, but the very presence of God is what will shift and change things and bring life and freedom. Cling to the name of God, cling to the presence of God. Thirdly, cling to the sacrifice of Jesus. In verse 3, David says, may God remember all your sacrifices and accept your burnt offerings. In the Old Testament, in order to come into the sanctuary and into the temple, you had to come and bring offerings and sacrifices. But we know now that Jesus was the ultimate sacrifice. He gave his life and became an offering so that we might step freely into the presence of God. It's what he's done, not what we've done. Guys, if we want to have confidence in whatever situation we find ourselves in, we need to constantly come back to who Jesus is, to what he did on the cross. Not just something that we occasionally remember, but something that is held before us all the time. So cling to the name of God, cling to the presence of God, cling to the sacrifice of Jesus, and fourthly, cling to the eternal victory of Jesus. David says this in verse 6, now this I know, the Lord gives victory to his appointed. He answers him from his heavenly sanctuary with the victorious power of his right hand. Here's the good news, guys. Jesus has victory. Now we need to remember that in the journey of him coming to the place of victory, he went through the journey of surrender, of sacrifice, of suffering, of the cross, but it led to victory. Guys, when we find ourselves in distressing situations, know that Jesus is the way, the one who has already walked through the places of difficulty. And when we find ourselves in those places, we know that he's with us, but we can know that he is victorious and he's seated at the right hand of the Father. So today, in distressing situations, cling to the name of God, to the presence of God, cling to the sacrifice of Jesus, and cling to the reality that Jesus has eternal victory. Bless you guys. Have a great day.